There you go.
Thank you. Got it. Good morning, everybody. This is a joint meeting of the San Miguel County Planning Commission and County Commissioners. Today is July 29th, and the time is 9:32. Present are a number of members of the Planning Commission and the County Commissioners here in the room, and a number online, as well as staff and a few members of the public. The first item of business is to review our agenda and confirm that we are content with today's agenda. Does anyone have any concerns with today's agenda? Not seeing any hands up in the Zoom or in the room, we'll continue on to a moment of silence for grounding and gratitude. Thank you, everyone. We are lucky to be here, and we are lucky to have our newest planning commissioner, Brad Johnson. Welcome, Brad. So glad that you are here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be participating, though remote this time. Look forward to seeing you all in person in August.
August it is.
Mark.
All right. I need to call up the agenda and make sure I'm not overlooking anything, but I do believe we are on to our one agenda item, and I just don't have that hard copy in front of me. Oh, thank you. Public comment. Let's do that. Is there any member of the public who has comments for either board for items not on the agenda? Thank you. Galina. I am not seeing any hands up, and we will close that opportunity and move on to item 6A, which is our joint work session. And Kay Simonson is going to give us a presentation of where the Strategic Stakeholders Roundtable Committee ended up. At that point, we will bat around ideas, questions, and try to come up with a recommendation for the county commissioners. Good morning, Kay.
Yeah, good morning. Want to preface this with, this is still a work in progress. The draft in the packet is by no means complete. There's still some things we're working out, still a few things that we need to add in. But we felt it was important to, get everybody up to speed as to where we're at, and get feedback, as we proceed. So, okay. Here we go. So the housing code update officially began in 2025, although it goes back farther. We had in 2024 a work session to discuss amendments to the CH zone, and at that point it was decided that we needed to have a more comprehensive look at our code relative to housing. But we began in 2025 with the selection of Logan Simpson as our consultant. And then they led community listening sessions in October of 2025, and gave people a lot of opportunity to provide feedback. And also the Strategic Stakeholder Roundtable was formed. We had a significant number of applicants, and the membership was selected by the Board of County Commissioners. And their first meeting was in October 2025. And this past Monday, I think we had meeting number 8. This is a comprehensive land use code audit and update to identify and remove regulatory barriers that constrain housing development. I'll get all the frogs out of my throat here in a moment. It's funded in part through a Prop 123 local planning capacity grant. The purpose is to identify where unnecessary complexity, costs, or delays prevent housing production. And the goal is to adopt changes to help accelerate affordable housing production. This does implement in part the East End Master Plan. And also we had the prioritized housing review up for review early this summer, and it was adopted in June. So the Strategic Stakeholder Roundtable group purpose is to serve in an advisory capacity, providing non-binding recommendations. The group acts as a bridge between technical analysis and community values. They also provide temperature checks on proposed solutions through consensus-seeking discussions. And they help identify unintended consequences of proposed code changes. They review and comment on the project as it develops. They serve as liaisons, sharing project information with their networks and bringing their feedback back to the roundtable. They amplify outreach efforts to ensure broad community input. And then they also have an SSR charter, which includes consensus-seeking norms, and we strive for a 70% supermajority for formal recommendations. Obviously, if it's mixed, we'll pass that along as well, like we did on the prioritized housing review. And we have 12 members plus another 10 or so that are associated with specific organizations. Lee, Hallie, Lance, myself, Jared's there on there, and people from the towns and the school district and TSG also. Because, basically those, entities who are significantly involved in housing. Just by way of a recap, this is our timeline. You see on the left-hand side, the SSR and the community listening sessions in October of last year. Went through a number of SSR meetings. We had the preliminary code audit report was issued in February. June, the prioritized housing review. Final code audit report draft came out early this month. We had 3 SSR meetings since then. And I think it's 3. I might have counted wrong. It might be only 2. Yeah, we've had at least 2 this month. And then we had the and now here we are at the Planning Commission and BOCC work session. So the focus of the amendment is to first look at 4 specific zone districts, and the zoning and the density. Specifically the community housing zone, the high density zone, the medium density zone, the low density zone. And consider reducing minimum lot sizes, adjusting density allowances, allowing multiple dwelling units on large lots, allow affordable housing development without PUDs, and refine the community housing zone. And then also we were looking at if there were additional workforce housing types that could be incorporated into our code. So we were looking at expanding housing type allowances. So, single family, 2-family, multifamily, cottage housing, co-housing, all of those types. Single family could be attached or detached. There could be townhomes. And I'm still saying single family and two family. We're actually shifting away from the use of family to household within our definitions. And that's consistent with state statute and just, we've made an adjustment to our code already for that, but finishing it. Looking at expanding allowances for mixed-use workforce housing in certain areas. Expanding ADU and caretaker allowances. To try and encourage, the actual use of those for local housing. And then incorporating cottage housing, co-housing, and tiny homes. So some of the items that are not in this update. We're not saying that they're not important, but they're just kind of beyond the scope. And there'll be something to look at in the future. At this point, we're not looking at adjusting parking requirements. A couple of years ago, we did an adjustment where we said that apartments and studios, one-bedroom apartments and studios only had to have one parking space. So we had already made a significant adjustment, and there's already the capability in the code for a developer to provide an alternative parking plan, explaining why they shouldn't have to provide as much parking as the code might require. For example, they're on a transit line, or if it's mixed use, the parking is used at different times of the day. So we're not talking about that.
Is that only available for PD or would that be available?
It's available through any process. And then we're not looking at incorporating campers, RVs, and vans as standalone or accessory housing use. We already went through the camping section and kind of got as far as we could on that. We do have in the community housing zone district, the alternative living spaces, which allows the consideration of, like seasonal, camper, RVs, yurts, any of those. So we're not looking at moving farther beyond what we have already. Application fee reductions or waivers. That would be something for the BOCC to look at within your, when we do fee resolutions. We say new incentive programs for deed restricted ADUs. We do have some proposals for ADUs, but we didn't go all in. For example, coming up with, there's jurisdictions that have created programs to help provide financial incentives, or there's having pre-designed, pre-approved plans, construction plans. We did, that would be something else to look at in the future. We're not looking at the employee housing mitigation impact fee structure, or the employee housing mitigation requirements. That would be a different project for a future time. We talked about having a transfer of development rights program, but we have so little land available that it just really didn't make sense to go into that. And we had talked about consolidating residential zones, but given how the zoning is already used throughout the county, that didn't seem a good use of our time. So, going through the zoning and density adjustments, first of all, focusing on the low density, medium density, and high density zones. And I'm just going to say LD, MD, and HD for most of this. But they're all fairly uniform in their purpose, which is to provide areas suitable for clustered, low, medium, or high mixed use development, depending on the respective zone districts, in accordance with the county's adopted comprehensive plan or master plan. For some reason, high density is worded a little bit differently than low and medium on that regard, but the effect is the same. So diving in here, we're looking at reducing minimum lot sizes. So right now, low, medium, and high density zones all have a minimum lot size of 35 acres that can have a single family dwelling. Anything more dense than that requires a PUD. And there's some other things in the code that, have to be fixed because, they say, you can only rezone PUDR, and we don't have any PUDR. So we'll need to, go in and take care of that as well. But so the reasoning behind that 35 acres is at 35 acres, you can have a well and you can have septic. But if you're going to go less than 35 acres, you need to have some sort of public or developed water. You can still have septic, or you can have public sewer. And then really, if you're going to go less than 1 acre in lot size, you need to be on public or some sort of water system. And you have to be on sewer because it gets too difficult to fit, well and set, everything on the same site, meet all the separations and the setbacks and everything.
Hey, are those points that you just made, are those called out in the land use code?
They're not so much in the land use code, they're in the Division of Water Resources regulations. I don't know that we have that specifically in there, and certainly in our services section, it might help at some point to clean that up and explain it a little bit more. But I mean, that is the reasoning behind the 35 acres. You simply cannot get a well permit for a new lot that's less than 35 acres. So we would maintain that minimum lot size in the by right administrative review section. Because everything else would require a subdivision. But then our proposed minimum lot sizes with a subdivision or a PUD, looking at decreasing low density to 2 acres, medium density to 1 acre, no minimum lot size on high density because all of the other development standards and everything will just kind of work it out. And then also looking at reducing the Wrights Mesa Town residential to 2,500 square feet. And that would be, specifically for creating more housing. We're not looking at any minimum lot size changes in any other zone districts. So questions on minimum lot size, and if not, I'll move on to density.
Good question. When I looked at the first draft of before you issued this particular chart, it had proposed slightly different lot sizes for each of the zone districts and had proposed them by right. But that has been taken out by right, and that's because that was an error.
Yeah, as we discussed it further, by putting them in as by right, that it didn't recognize the need for a subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
And also, as we move into density, you'll notice that for the most part, the minimum lot size is smaller. If you multiply out times density, that the minimum lot size isn't the same. And the reason for that is you might want to, you'll need to put in roads. So you need to leave some room in your development for the capability to have roads, infrastructure, and possibly open space as well. So the density allowances, would continue to keep the 1 per 35 by right for low, medium, and high. Right now, low density with a PUD can be one dwelling unit per 7 acres, and medium can be 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres. And then high density actually goes by number of people per acre, 40 people per acre minimum, so it sets a floor, and 80 people per acre maximum. So if you're looking at your standard 4 people per household assumption, you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 20 units per acre on that. But then high density also has the potential for mixed use development. There can be commercial, there can be lodging in there. And there are formulas within the code that assign densities to those as well. So it's kind of getting into some advanced math. So what we're proposing to do is create a couple of tiers. And there would be another column here, just kind of ran out of room, where kind of sticking at that base density with a PUD, but only providing the mandatory amount of deed restricted lots or housing. So a subdivision or a multifamily unit structure must deed restrict 1/3 of their lots or units. That's in the code already. And what we were trying to do with tier 1 and tier 2 is encourage people to provide more than the minimum. So we would have that tier 1, tier 2 outside of the PUD process also. And that's something that didn't quite make it into the draft. But that is the intent. So we talked about on Monday with the SSR what these tiers should be. And we had started at 37% and everybody said, no, let's strive for more. So if it's Lance?
Just wanted to add a little background as to why we thought that striving for more was so important. The logic that really persuaded the SSR to raise those ratios was that at 37%, we're really not making much headway in affordable housing. And we all agreed that our charge was to open the door to more affordable housing and not just free market housing. And to go at 37% was not a step forward, it was more of a quarter step forward, and all the impacts of more free market housing. So after much discussion, and Dan Kraft finally took a dart and threw it at the board, we came up with these higher ratios for tier 1 and tier 2 in an effort to try to find the magic number that gives incentive to skip the PUD process, because that takes time. And in return, do a 2-step process. And then Kay is going to get to the but, which is the caps. That's why I left it for Kay.
Yep.
A little before the cats.
Mm.
Tier 1 numbers look exactly like the PUD numbers. Tier 1 lets you get there through a 2-step review instead of a PUD, simply by deed restricting some lots. That's the key piece there.
Yeah. Lee?
Thank you. That was a really big question I had in my mind around what does this correlate to as far as process?
Yeah, and I have another slide about that. So
You know us, but we're getting ahead. You can clarify for everybody, the deed restriction, the 1/3 deed restriction requirement. How does that relate to any other mitigation requirements that might be in play? Is that just wildly variable? Does it replace the mitigation?
So the mitigation fee only applies to single family and 2-family development, not in a subdivision. If a property is in a subdivision that has dedicated their in some form lots or property as mitigation, then those houses don't have to pay the fee. So El Tesoro Ranch dedicated locals lots when they platted in 1990-91, which is about when we adopted the housing code requirements, and things were moving and moving parts like about then. But so El Tesoro Ranch, because they've mitigated for their housing, they don't have to pay the mitigation fee for those single and single family homes. Deep Creek and Mill Creek PUDs, if and when they start selling lots, those, and people start building, they will not have to pay because we are getting property in order to develop housing. So there's that piece. But, you know, if somebody comes in and says, I don't want to give you land, but I want to subdivide, then they you know, they would well, no, they would deed restrict their lots. But if it's something that's already subdivided and never paid or never dedicated or, you know, created the deed restricted lots, then they have to pay the fee. So, you know, that's ski ranches, the preserve, raspberry patch, last dollar, all of those older subdivisions.
So I'm clear on this, Kay.
So these examples you're giving, if there was a certain percentage of the subdivision that was dedicated, that they designated to be deed restricted lots, then the free market lots would also be exempt from the employee impact mitigation fee, the entirety of the
That's correct.
subdivision. Just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that. Thank you.
So yeah, that's the difference. You know, if it was a subdivision that deed restricted lots in some way, they're exempt from the fee. If they did not deed restrict lots, then those houses, you know, any new houses and major, you know, additions have to pay the fee. We up to speed on that? Okay. And then if they're doing commercial and hotel, there's a whole different calculation on how, you know, how they have to provide housing.
Just.
Yeah.
I'll pull you up, but I have a quick question about this. When we're looking at density percentages, are we talking about like total square footage of what's built, or are we talking about units?
It'd be units.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the low density, we would start at the one dwelling unit per 7 acres. But if it's, you know, 50 to 79% of the units are deed restricted, then, you know, instead of being a PUD, it would be a 2-step process. If they deed restrict 80% or more, they can increase the density to 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, and they're also in a 2-step process. Medium density, it's 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres for tier 1, the 50 to 79%. But we would put a cap of 25 units outside of the PUD process. There was concern that some of these developments might be too big. So it'd be 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres up to 25 units outside of the PUD process at 50 to 79% deed restricted. And then tier 2, 80% or more deed restricted, 1 dwelling unit per 1 acre up to 50 units outside of PUD process. And this is the one spot where our density and our minimum lot size line up. We had a little bit of a discussion about that, but we ultimately decided to just kind of go with it right now.
I think that was in part because it was, we were exhausted, but
Yeah.
do you see issues with that?
It can be difficult for developers to hit maximums, which can cause frustration with them.
So they might just have to shade it down.
Might have to, yeah. Yeah, I've worked with codes where the density and the minimum lot size were totally aligned. And it was extremely frustrating to developers because they could never achieve their max density.
So would the answer be 1 unit per 1.1 acres, or would it be to change the minimum lot size to 0.9? Like, is there a small tweak we can do to fix that?
We could take I would say take the minimum lot size down, because remember, when you're getting at this size, you're providing water already. And it's kind of feasible to put water, you know, fit OWTS on a 1/2 acre. I mean, the whole Fall Creek area down Valley does it. But it gets tight. But if they're served by public water, then you don't have the well setback issue. So that's something to keep in mind, is that, you know, on the medium density here, do we want to keep that 1 acre So useful when I point at my computer screen, you can really see what I'm doing. But you know, this 1 acre here, we might want to look at taking that down a little bit.
Well, we're talking about feasibility, and if you want to table this question, I'm fine with it, but when I was going through the proposed density bonus options, which by the way, I really like, I think that what you explained, Lance, about wanting to make sure that any density bonuses were only on projects that have a lot of deed restriction property. Anyway, I love this whole structure. But when I looked at the idea of a a project that's 50 to 79% deed restricted, and there'd be one density unit on 7 acres, how did that project ever be built? Like, no one can afford to allocate 7 acres to a deed restricted unit. And so I think the way I read it is that we will never have any deed restricted units or developments in lower medium density, because it's just not a profitable use of the land.
The thing to keep in mind is density is an average. So when we talk about density, it's the average, it averages out to 7 units per acre. So if you had a 35 acre property and so 35 divided by 7 equals 5, you could do 4 1 acre lots. Or what did we come up with? 4 2 acre lots, so that's 8 acres subtracted from 35, and you'd have a 27 acre parcel left for somebody to do their tiny little family compound cottage.
I believe the phrase we used was starter castle and then your cottage is on the side.
Yeah.
So that's where the clustered development could really come into play.
Yes.
And just to provide a little background, because the SSR also dug into this, we started with the precept that we did want clustered development and that we were trying to steer development that way. That's stated in the land use code, but it's also just sensible. And for the caps, which Kay mentioned, but I wanted to add a little more background on, many of the members felt that if we hit a certain number of units, it was worth a full-blown community discussion with 5 steps. And we all agreed with that. We just had a hard time coming up with the perfect number. So we relied on Dan's round numbers and decided we liked them.
Yeah. And then, so you see the cap at medium density is 25 to 50. We didn't put caps in low density because we didn't really see anything that big happening. High density, the density goes 10 dwelling units per acre for tier 1, 20 dwelling units per acre for tier 2. This could be a mixed use development, but putting it up to 50 units for tier 1 and up to 100 units for tier 2.
Basically, both of those allow you to fully develop 5 acres at that rate without going through a PUD, and anything bigger than that needs to go to PUD. That was the feeling of the SSR. Because again, the tier 1 and tier 2 are giving you these things with a 2-step review process in exchange for deed restricting your properties. But if you don't want to deed restrict, you can stick with the PUD process. Takes longer, you can go bigger, you can achieve similar densities. You just don't get the faster review.
Yeah, and we don't currently have any high density zoned land. The last time we did was Mountain Village. And of course that ceased to be county zoning when was incorporated. But so if somebody somehow miraculously found that level size of land again, something of that scale would go through a PUD, obviously.
And most of the conversations about where might this happen were centered around the East End Master Plan and the future land use identifications.
Which I also have in a future slide.
You got us well trained though.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll address this, but this has been a burning question for me. Where's the community housing zone district in this?
Stay tuned.
At this point, we have not looked at adjusting the density allowances. So that allows 20 dwelling units per acre. The affordable housing PUD allows 15 units per acre. Where we're at right now, we don't have any proposed changes on those.
And that would, can you enlighten me on the discussions among the SSR on that topic?
Yes, I can say that after 3 hours of meeting Monday, we got to this chart and the one before. We then at 12:01 mentioned the CH zone, realized that we did not have time to give it full consideration, and the group all agreed to continue meeting and to continue to work on future recommendations. We didn't set a time, but we agreed that we were all in and that CH was something that remained on our list.
I have another question about this. In the CH zone, for 90%, I think it is, affordable housing, not only do you get 20 units per acre, but you get some additional height allowance. Is that, are we gonna come to that? Is that gonna be? part of
I'll
this?
talk about the
Okay.
height thing. Yeah, because yeah, there are some questions about height in the CH zone.
But are we gonna allow any height variances or
Yeah,
bonuses? Okay, for
Okay.
non-CH zone.
No, for non-CH, we are not looking at increasing the height at all. So,
About that at one point.
not for the non-CH, for CH, yes. But, we did not talk about increasing above the 35-foot height for low, medium, or high density.
We did, however, talk in general about the need for more fully developed incentives. And many of those are not in this scope list. I think there are some others that can be brought up as well, but I wouldn't say that it's off the table. It's just that we didn't really contemplate it.
And I'd say, the low and medium zone districts
Yeah.
do not need over 35 feet. Perhaps the high density zone could tolerate 40 feet.
I should look at that because, I mean, this is an opportunity, right? Why put it off if it's something we've already thought about and added to or incorporated into the CH zone district? Why not do that now too?
It was a discussion we had in February, and I don't have notes on how that shook out. I'd have to go back to Dre's email, but we did talk about how high density at 4 stories could be a bonus,
Yeah.
but then I think we kind of dropped that.
If I recall correctly, we did have a little bit of discussion how the 40-foot is allowed for net zero in CH. And we talked about the kind of positives and negatives about that with affordable housing. Are we requiring affordable housing to kind of get over a zero, kind of an energy efficiency level that will cost more money in order to get that height allowance? And that's kind of where I think our conversation stalled out, was maybe we need to really consider, is incentivizing affordable housing sufficient enough to allow the 40-foot height instead of the net zero approach? Or as some substitute for net zero, and that's where the conversation kind of spun out and said, I think we also went till noon or 6 or 7 on that day and ran out of gas on that. But that was the concept we were discussing at that point in time. And we just have not carried that any further.
Yeah, it's, like I said, this is still a work in progress and we haven't forgotten about it. We just haven't necessarily gotten there. So,
Hey, can I just piggyback on Jared real quick? Another reason to kind of circle back to that point is the net zero point is somewhat being diminished now by the county's future proposed adoption of the state's energy efficiency. What the words are, building. And so it's not gonna wipe out net zero. I mean, we're not gonna immediately get to net zero by adopting that, but it's certainly going to push us to do better development that is more energy efficient anyway. So that might be a reason to reconsider that requirement.
Um,
Agreed.
moving into the dimensional stuff. Yeah, refresh my memory. Okay, I don't have the height slide in here. But we do have in the draft in the CH zone that if it's more deeply affordable, so basically matching the prioritized review, they can go to 40 or 45 feet. I don't remember the exact number right now. So that was the premise. If they were going with more deeply affordable, they could get more height. And of course, we have the MXD Society Turn example where we said you can have another floor if that floor is solely devoted to employee housing, extra employee housing, above and beyond their minimum requirements. So,
I think this is a really important, topic to address now, or, during this process. Because, that's our really only option for increasing, one of our most powerful options for increasing density is the height.
if you've got parcels that, have a steep hill behind them, the height may not be as much of an issue.
Exactly.
You don't want it to ridge line and be extra height. But if, it's farther back from the roads, it's farther back from, there are things that really can alleviate those impacts. We have been looking at setbacks. Right now, low density has a 50-foot setback on all sides, looking at taking that down to 25. We might actually want to go to 20 on the sides. Which is the minimum in our F zone. And then medium density, so medium and high, you'll see that 12.5 feet for side yard setbacks. And that comes from the current PUD standards in those zone districts. And that comes from the early 90s when the conventional approach at that point was to have 25-foot separation between buildings for fire safety. In the early 90s, buildings were not sprinklered. Very few buildings were sprinklered. Some like commercial building here. This one was sprinklered. But residential structures weren't. Now they are, especially as they get bigger. The other thing was we have better fire resistant materials. We have the wildfire resiliency code. So I talked this over with Matt yesterday, and because we wanted to verify with him that would he be okay with us taking that down to a smaller number that would 12.5 feet is just weird when you're doing site review. So at least taking it down to say in the medium density, taking it down to 10 feet. High density, do we want to, also do 10 feet, or would we like it a little smaller? The building code starts at 5 feet. They used to, back in the early 90s, say, oh, we have to be able to drive a fire engine through there. It's like, no, if a building's on fire, you're not driving a fire engine into there. That's not good practice. So we're looking at the setbacks. This is where we're at right now. I think there's going to be some shift on some of this still, but we're looking at, providing relief. And of course, if it's an attached single family, then like we set out in the community housing zone, those would be 0. And what we did in community housing is we said, 0 for inside for attached. And then if it was the end unit, there was a side setback. Another thing that's in community housing is we have I think it's a 20-foot setback to any property line or road that is not part of that development. And the idea was to maintain a little bit of separation to other developed residential areas. And, you know, as we have some community housing plans being done, the ability to have some flexibility in that setback based on site conditions would be desirable. So just kind of, again, this is a work in progress, but it's all the things that we're thinking about. So. Yeah, you look like you were gonna say something.
That was, and then I held off.
Okay. So review process, this is definitely something that hasn't totally made it into the draft. But as I mentioned, all development in the LDH DMD zones, other than a single family home on 35 acres requires a PUD. So our intent is that projects proposing significant affordable housing, tier 1 or tier 2, up to certain thresholds will be subject to 1 or 2 step review. We haven't figured out exactly where. CH, if a property is 5 acres or smaller, it can be a 1-step review. If it's over 5 acres, it's 2-step. And then it also CH also has a range of free market mix. And so at 1-step, you can have 1 free market unit. At 2-step, it's 10% free market, 20% if they're net zero. And then I'm trying to remember this. And then there's a 2-step or PUD if you want to go above that. So there's some free market potential in CH, but it's kind of the upside down of what we have in the tier 1, tier 2. And then eventually tier 1 or tier 2 gets to kind of the CH level, if you will, if you put them side by, you know, they cross paths. So, and then I mentioned, you know, the 25-50 maximum and units in medium density and 50 and 100 units in high density. And then again, if they're not tier 1 or tier 2, or they're over the tier limits, then they go through the PUD. So we don't have all of this in writing, but that's the direction that we're going. In terms of zoning and future land use, we had a pretty good discussion about that on Monday as well. All land that's now zoned low density and medium density is already subdivided and it already has entitlements. So if those subdivisions want to take advantage of what we're doing, it'll be up to them to ask as to whether or not, you know, if they want to, you know, seek some of the stuff that's in here. But we do not have any unsubdivided land. There might be vacant lots within those, but we don't have any unsubdivided land that's zoned low density or medium density. And there's no land zoned HD, as I said. East End Master Plan land use identifies areas that could be rezoned. So if it's a residential low future land use, it could be low density, as well as F, low density residential, which is specific to the Mill Creek, Deep Creek PUDs. So we're not touching that one, or affordable housing PUD. Residential medium would be medium density zone, community housing zone, as well as the low density residential and affordable housing PUD. And then residential high would be the high density zone district, community housing zone district, as well as the affordable housing PUD and the MXD mixed use zone. To give you an idea of what we've got out there that's vacant. So this is the future land use map, kind of the north side of it. I just kind of cut out parts that aren't even available. So the Diamond Ridge area is residential low. The Alexander Ilium property is residential high. We also put residential high on a Forest Service parcel that's just south of Two Rivers and below the Ilium water tanks. And then the Church Camp and Cordillera property south of that in Ilium Valley would be residential medium. Obviously, figuring out water for all of these would be a crucial step before going to development on them. And then going south, there is some residential low designation in more towards Ames. Whether or not they chose to figure out water so they could rezone is another question. There is some residential high up at Overloop. There's about 11 acres there. And then residential medium at the Pathfinder and Matterhorn sites near San Bernardo. So that's really all that's out there unless subdivisions decide to start redoing their plans. And I don't see that happening immediately, but.
You say on the previous slide that there is no low density, medium density or high density that is not already subdivided.
That's, so they've all been, and so the one piece that, the Diamond Ridge is divided into 35-acre tracts and Diamond Ranch is 35-acre tracts. So that would be probably the one area, but all the rest of these are all pretty much well, divvied up.
And so would they be able to take advantage of all these density bonuses and everything? They've already subdivided.
If they wanted to redo their subdivision.
Okay, redo their subdivision.
What
Yeah.
does that mean? What does that look like?
I mean, we have to go through and figure out what the current density is, what their proposed density is, where would they be finding the new lots?
So if they wanted more lots,
Yeah,
but right now they have lots, so.
yeah, but if the potential is there to create more because they didn't use up all their density, then they could propose that.
Was there discussion in the SSR about incentivizing subdivisions to look at density, not just, I mean, what happened when we created the CH zone district is we got some activity from the governments, we got no activity from the private sector.
That will continue to be a struggle. We had a lot of discussion on Monday about, private developers, public-private partnerships versus, governmental and nonprofit development. And, cost of construction, all these different things. We can't fix them in the zone, but we can open the door to making it possible if the financing and such can be figured out. And also the will, private developers, will often go with the easy route.
One small thing that occurred to me was that you mentioned there were some subdivisions that because they did not meet restricting lots, when they divided each lot as it gets rebuilt would be subject to the mitigation fee. Maybe there's a way where we approach those subdivisions and say you could build and deed restrict X number of units. But you also get a pathway out of the individual litigation.
Yeah, that is something that could be looked at in the future. We do have the ability or the provision that if somebody is building new or doing an addition that has a somewhat significant fee, they can mitigate by building and deed restricting an ADU caretaker unit in the F zone, ADU in the low, medium, high, and in lieu of that fee. So,
An ADU that's deed restricted.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so some other adjustments, so in the F zone, you can have a caretaker unit that's up to 2,000 square feet. And in the low, medium and high density zones, you can have, an accessory dwelling unit of 800 square feet. And then in the Wrights Mesa zone, the Wrights Mesa rural agricultural zones, there can be a secondary unit on a parcel that's 5 acres or larger. So what we're looking at doing is in the F zone, if a property is over 35 acres and has a domestic well, that domestic well permit says you can serve 3 dwelling units. And so our thought there is, well, why don't we let them build that 3rd dwelling unit? And the condition would be, so it'd be, we're not looking at reducing the size of them. So they could have 2 2,000 square foot caretaker units, and then 1 single family home up to 11,999 square feet.
They can't.
They could. So what we're saying here is they could have the 2 caretaker units plus the primary house, which can go as large as 12,000 before going to a SUP. But that second deed restricted caretaker unit would have to be deed restricted. We would offer relief in terms of the separation between the principal and the caretaker. That's something that we've often been asked, well, could I have it farther away? So, that would be the incentive for that. And the other thing is that deed restricted caretaker unit, we're basically letting them double dip in that it can offset their mitigation fee. So, pretty generous.
You clarified, so if they deed restricted, obviously whoever lives there has to be qualified.
Yes.
Is there a requirement that it's occupied also?
Yes, that is written into the deed restriction. So they have to, do their regular check-ins with SMRHA, document who's living there, and making sure that they are a qualified employee, and then making sure that it is occupied, and the deed restriction specifies how long a unit can remain vacant.
I'm sorry, I'm backing up a little here. Can you explain why we have a caretaker idea and ADU idea? Like, why can't we just have one of those?
So the caretaker is, like I said, it's 2,000 square feet and it's in the F zone. So it's on the 35 acre, the big 35 acre parcels. The accessory dwelling unit is in the low density, medium density, high density, and we're also looking at putting in community housing. Those are because those are denser, smaller lots. They've been limited to 800 square feet. We're saying, let's increase that size to 1,000 square feet. But once you get into those higher density zones, 2,000 square feet is just straight up development. So it's the difference in the size. You want the ADU to be subordinate to the principal structure. And when you get into the higher density areas, that becomes less relevant. Or not less relevant. If you allow a larger, a very large ADU, my house, how many of us live in houses that are over 2,000 square feet? Some of you do, a bunch of us don't.
Yeah.
I've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that's less than 2,000.
But more than 1,000.
I used to live in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house that was 1,000. It's about good design.
About ADUs. So let's talk low density. We're talking about use by right being allowed to subdivide that down to 1 per 7 acres. And the minimum lot size would be 2 acres. If that happens, can you still build an ADU?
Yes.
On that 2 acres?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just a 35 acre.
No,
low density.
the 2,000 square foot caretaker is limited to the F zone. And then the 2,000 square foot secondary unit, I know it's confusing. We have 3 different types, 3 different names. 2,000 square foot secondary unit, that's limited to the Wrights Mesa zones.
It's very. But
It
thank
is.
you for your explanation.
Yeah.
But the
And we've tried to
1,000
figure out how to unconfuse it and could not come up with a way.
The caretaker, not by definition.
The caretaker unit, by definition in the code, says they are intended to provide housing for locals. But aside from that weird 1994 to 2007 period, no, they weren't deed restricted. And we have very few caretaker units on larger lots that are deed restricted.
One key, the door tomorrow, application for a caretaker.
Mhm.
Would we process that as a deed restriction? Or that's not a technical requirement of.
No, and because, the employee housing mitigation fee only applies to units that are above 2,000 square feet or, at 2,000 and larger. The employee housing mitigation fee does not apply to detached caretaker units. If they're attached, it's a different story. But most people have them detached. But yeah,
I have a question on the Wrights Mesa RA zone districts, and perhaps this is just my infamiliarity with the deed restriction on the occupancy. So I wonder, was there a discussion of the nature of the occupancy of employees in those potentially permitted tertiary units in those areas? So for example, does the seasonality of, say, branding and calving season align with the minimum occupancy, or perhaps the peak needs for the East End and those who only come out seasonally? Was that discussed? Would we run into issues where best efforts may see more vacancy just because of lack of seasonal interest when you get that far west of the East End?
so right now, we don't have deed restrictions in the Wrights Mesa zones. The Pinion Park project notwithstanding, and that's in the town.
Right.
Our deed restriction right now is for people for properties that are located in the R1 school district, the Telluride R1 school district, and then employees who work at least 8 months of the year and work at least, is it 1,200 hours or that, whatever the number is. A certain number of hours in that year. So the seasonal stuff that you're talking about would not qualify for occupancy of a deed restricted unit.
Right.
And if this goes through, we're going to have to figure out a not R1 deed restriction, because we have F zone that goes beyond the R1 school district, and then we'd have to figure out for Wrights Mesa rural agriculture. So
Okay.
yeah, it's another deed restriction. But it's, we would have to figure out, and we might just make the F zone or the outside of R1, just say as long as you're working in San Miguel County.
Okay.
Leave the school districts out of it.
Okay. Or even perhaps Western Montrose, given that a lot of the ranch owners will span between Redvale and Norwood in those circumstances. So you may see people clocking into work in different fields on different sides of the county line. We may want to consider that when we assess that later on, but thank you for answering that.
The final bullet point here that we would allow up to 2 secondary units on Wrights Mesa and Wrights Mesa rural agricultural zone districts. Would both of those have to be deed restricted or just one?
Just one.
Same as with the F zone.
Yes.
That makes sense. And then I want to say, I really like all this. I think it's actually moving us in the right direction. The question I have here is around the separation between the secondary units or caretaker ADU and the primary residence. I know 300 has been an issue for us because people really today are more interested in privacy than ever. And I'm just wondering if that 450 is enough and how you arrived at that number.
We've had requests for variances over the years. And there's been a range. The opportunity still remains for them to say, it works better if I have it over here, and go to the BOA for variance. But 450 works within most of the requests that we get. Remember that, we want to keep things clustered. If the ADU or not the ADU, if the caretaker unit is fairly close to the primary structure and all of its any other accessory buildings like garages and shops, what have you, those, it looks like a typical ranch assemblage. But once you start scattering across the property, then it looks like you have smaller lots. So the idea is to keep the appearance of the larger property rather than having it look like smaller developed properties.
Come up to the microphone, come on up.
There's also wildlife implications. The more scattered the property, buildings on the property are, you can get into migration zones, or just by keeping it compact, like Kay's saying, there's multiple benefits to doing that.
And can the variance again be issued through the administrative review or one step or two step repair PD?
Variances to setbacks are reviewed by the BOA.
Which is the
Board of Adjustment.
who's that?
That's the well, we now have 4 members. And they're the board. So you recently appointed Jonathan Prince to that.
We meet periodically to variance requests.
That's so interesting. Why doesn't the planning commission just do that?
The variance and BOA process is actually set out in statute. And yeah.
In terms of process, would they come to the planning commission as to 2 of their requests with the variance approval in place, or would we make the approval additional on the variance?
Typically, the variance is achieved first. And obviously there's the caveat that yes, you've got the variance, now you can go ask the planning commission. But if for some reason, there's an issue, you're not bound by that other board.
Okay, before you proceed, I see a hand up from our Road and Bridge Department, and I wanted to catch them before we move to topics. Is that okay to jump in, Road and Bridge?
Sure.
Great. Road and Bridge, we'll ask you to unmute. Carmen's pushing the buttons.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute.
We got you, Ryan.
My video is still disabled, but so anyways, when we're discussing the multiple units on single parcels, the access on, one of our primary goals is to minimize conflict on public roadways. And so we'd like to see them share, a single point of access. I know that a lot of times when they do development and someone wants to build an additional house, or if they're allowed to build 2 additional units, that they don't want to share access and they want to construct additional driveways. But our comments from Road and Bridge are always going to be that we want to minimize those. And so we would ask that in every chance we can, that they share an access point, one access point to that development.
Yeah, so yet another reason to keep them close.
Can we add the vote, the access?
At some point, we need to go through our Road and Bridge, section 5-5 and clarify that, but that is a long-standing policy and we've got some hints of that already.
Is that something we should do during this process? It's not that complicated?
We need to, at some point in the future, go through all of section 5-5. And that would be one thing that we would clarify.
If I could, Commissioner Brown, as of now, we do get responses from Road and Bridge saying, reduce that access, and we tend to work with owners, try to minimize In some cases, the owner can say, doesn't say, we can't. Right, but in most cases, you get workable solutions. Should we clarify that and mandate a single point of entry and exit? And any secondary access be required to go through a variance process? That might be the amendment we're talking.
Right.
So, and I guess to clarify for Commissioner Brown too, a lot of that we get is guidance. It's guidance, and it's so they're not like hard set standards. And so it's guidance that we use out of like that's given to us by federal highways or from CDOT or from, it's just an industry standard that we say we want to minimize. We don't set a rule saying you're only allowed one driveway, but the guidance that we've given in this industry is we want to minimize that impact by reducing that. So every opportunity we have, so we have to look at each case individually. So I'm not saying that in every single case we would have just a single driveway. There might be some that due to topography or, you know, some geographic nature of the parcel that we might have, you know, two driveways, but we would just lean towards, you know, in that design of just restricting that or trying to keep it to within one, or just to minimize.
Thanks, Ryan.
And during the review process on an application, we always do a referral to the appropriate fire agency. And that's another significant consideration for driveways.
Yeah, even on our administrative stuff, we're referring it to the appropriate fire district. We're referring it to Road and Bridge. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes where the real magic happens.
Thank you.
So, okay, so we talked about community housing. Again, you know, this is one area that isn't fully cooked. We haven't really had a chance to talk about it much with the SSR. But, you know, looking at revising the purpose statement to better reflect community priorities and values, that was something that was very strongly articulated back in 2024. Adding in co-housing units, and I'll get into explaining the difference between co-housing and cottage housing in a minute. And then allow development of up to 40 feet for multifamily buildings and up to 45 feet in height for development with more deeply affordable restrictions, in addition to the development incentivizing net zero on an annual basis. So instead of having just the net zero, looking at having a little bit more of a menu to work with.
Okay, if I may.
Yeah.
One of the comments we had 2 days ago, right at the end of our meeting about community housing was with the high density zone that we just defined, having caps on how large the project can be without going through a PUD process. Do we want to align community housing so they look similar to each other? We didn't discuss it. That was just a point that was brought up, but this might be another opportunity to say, should we make the CH zone and the HD align a little bit better?
Yeah. And that's yet another discussion.
So, okay, to be clear, the slide that you're showing, is that language that you intend to write up formally and present to the BOCC for an update in this round? Or is that language
Yes.
that you want to take back to the SSR for future discussion?
We probably need to go back to the SSR for more discussion on this because we really haven't dived into it. Appendix A does have a draft, but we're already seeing where it needs some work.
Okay, I would support bringing the entire CH discussion back to the SSR since it's something that we tabled deliberately.
Yeah. So workforce housing types and housing names, you know, getting away from using the term family. And so duplex dwelling, single household attached dwelling, townhomes, adding that in there. Single detached household dwelling or detached single household dwellings, which is your conventional house. Multi-household dwellings, that could be apartments that are all under one ownership. They could be condominiums where each individual unit is owned separately. And then we also have the concept of co-housing and cottage housing. The two of them are quite similar. Cottage housing would be more likely to occur in a high density situation. And what these are generally are is smaller houses, quite efficient in their design. They tend to be centered around a common shared open space. And they may have some shared facilities where, people can gather, you got a small house, you can't have a big party in there. So you have a community building that you can use. Might have, other community amenities, gardens, what have you. The parking is not necessarily right next to each unit. So that's cottage housing. We already have cottage housing allowances in the Wrights Mesa Town Residential Zone District, but it needed a little bit of work in that regard to clarify it. And then we've had requests for co-housing, and this tends to happen more out in the F zone, where people say, well, I want to have like my central building, lodge, whatever you want to call it, where that's got the cooking facilities and, a main gathering area. But then there are individual cottages or cabins that have their own bathing facilities, and they might have like a wet bar level of, but not a full kitchen. Obviously you have to work out the water and you have to work out the wastewater for these. But that's what co-housing is. Co-housing might be held by just one person, or it might be held as kind of a joint community type of thing. It's not a condominium. Cottage houses, each person owns their own property, at least their own house. You work out whether or not the land underneath it is owned by the community or by individuals. In some ways, Two Rivers was set up that way initially, and it didn't quite work. So we ended up doing a land division so everybody owns their own land underneath it now. But so co-housing, cottage housing, new concepts. We've had people ask about doing it, but to this point, we've had to say we really can't. We don't have a way. So it's not, a totally easy path, but we're giving people the opportunity to explore it and see if they can get there.
Those models in the future, when we're looking at deed restriction, might that be an area where seasonal workforce be housed that don't meet the deed restrictions requirements? Is there discussion about that?
So this just falls under the density, the general density. Whether or not we want to start creating things like this that are for seasonal that don't meet the deed restriction, that's kind of a policy discussion.
That's a good point. Okay, have we taken the extra level of review to say, for example, on this table 7 in the final code audit report draft? Table 7 shows the zone district, the by-use rights, administrative review, 1 step, 2 step PUD for different housing types by zone district. Have we looked at how those will interact with our density tables now and our tier 1s, our tier 2s, and does that all jive?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Logan Simpson's been looking at that.
We just changed some of those numbers on Monday, and I'm just
Yeah.
curious if now we can have 200 yurts on less than an acre, is that a thing? Have we thought about that?
Yurts, while interesting, cannot meet the energy code.
But
So,
they're in here though. High
There,
density 2-step review for yurts requires 2-step review. If it's more than 5 acres of yurt. And so I guess I'm just curious.
What?
I'm in table 7 of the density code. We touched on this at the end of our SSR meeting, but we didn't really have time to dive into it. The question was just, does anyone have comments on the table?
That's where I brought up the whole thing about duplexes. I kind of took us down that.
Yeah. So we have a definition in the code of alternative living spaces that came out with the CH zone. And the RV tiny home yurt and alternative living spaces falls within that. And yeah, I do not see us having 100 yurt.
But it says we could by a two-step process.
We'll look at it a little closer.
Okay, might be worth bringing the image of. Maybe we want 200 years out of it.
But yeah, yurts are a total challenge because they can't meet the energy code, therefore the building department can't consider them a dwelling unit.
So.
Um, yeah, so then we've got, yeah,
5 acres, but
Yeah.
this, this is total conflict. So the two-step review for high density more than 5 acres. But we also have a limit of. I guess it's a density limit, so basically if we go max density, you're only able to develop 5 acres, but you can still develop more than 5 acres with less than max density. Don't worry about it, we're by P.
like I said, this is a work in progress and we still got a lot of things to look at. And, you know, we had major decisions on Monday that have not carried its way through the draft.
Yeah, okay.
So, you know, we've talked about this, most of this already, expanding ADU, provisions, duplex and townhome allowances, creating the allowances for the new housing types that we've talked about. But keeping in mind that all recommendations apply only where the project meets requirements for density allowances and review standards for public services, water supply, wastewater treatment, road access, wildlife-friendly fences, environmental impact, scenic views, maintenance plans. So all of these things come together. You know, hopefully at the end we have a project. I'm almost to a point where we would take a break here. Current process right now, administrative review, development permits take 2 to 4 weeks. Decision makers, planning director, planning department, no public hearing, you know, ADUs, some minor amendments, you know, standard building permits, are reviewed at this point. One-step review takes 6 to 8 weeks. It goes to either the planning commission or the BOCC, depending on what the code says. There is a public hearing. This could be special use permits, and then we're talking about some medium scale projects. Two-step review, it takes 10 to 12 weeks with a good application. Planning commission recommendation and then BOCC decision. There's a public meeting with the planning commission and a public hearing with the BOCC. And, you know, examples here, rezoning, substantial amendments, major developments, some of our SUPs fall in there. And then we have our 5-step review, which can take to 6 to 12 months or more. You know, we've seen some that take 7 years. Multiple planning commission and BOCC stages, multiple public hearings. You know, this is the subdivisions and the PUDs. Just to add in here at the next planning commission meeting, there's going to be a work session on an amendment to the subdivision and PUD section, basically separating out subdivisions from PUDs. Right now, the code says, you know, can't imagine a subdivision that isn't a PUD. So separating that out, but then also creating a minor subdivision process that allows the creation of 4 or fewer lots through a 2-step process. And that's very normal across almost everywhere in the US. But for some reason not here. So, you know, looking at that, you know, the ability to create 4 lots actually will remove a barrier that works in tandem with a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about today. So planning commission will see that on the 13th. BOCC, you're welcome to attend, but I think all of you had conflicts for that day. There's always the tube of you.
Just thinking about that with
Excuse me,
subdivision.
would you mic up, because they can't, I've got
Oh.
text that they can't.
Yeah, with the minor subdivisions only allowing 4, but now we're saying with these density bonuses and such, you might have 5-acre lots on a 35-acre parcel. Do we want to think about that number?
I would not go more than 4. And it's, it's a matter of decisions. We also have to figure out, if 1/3 of all lots have to be deed restricted, but you're creating 4 lots, what happens to the 4th lot? I have not figured that one out yet. But no, I'm comfortable with 4. I mean, that's, that is, if you start pushing it to 5 and then you push it to 6 and then everybody's got a different number in mind.
Is that because it's kind of a national standard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For example, in California, it's statute that you have to have a minor subdivision process. And most of our West Slope counties have a minor subdivision process that allows, 4.
I guess I would just say in thinking about our tier 1, tier 2s and having at least a 5 in there for exactly the reason you just answered, what do you do with the 1/3 part of a 4th?
Yeah.
Just a thought to consider before the packets come out.
Yeah. I think we'll go with what we've got right now. Not necessarily throw anything else in just now, but we'll think about it. And then the other thing that we're throwing in on that is a condominium subdivision exemption. Up to this point, people doing condominiums within the county can just go ahead and record it with no review from us. And we have paid the price a little bit. We've seen some examples where the condominium subdivision has been used to avoid subdivision or major PUD amendments. So this gives us a chance to look at their maps and look at their documents, their covenants, and make sure it doesn't conflict with anything that we've got. One of my favorite examples, a condo plat I reviewed years ago. They wanted to take all their parking spaces and make them limited common elements separate from the individual condo units, so they could sell them off separately, which was completely subverting the code. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking for. So just as a by the way, we are hoping that we can kind of resolve that subdivision thing. So here we are with our joint meeting. In August, we'll be continuing to work on the draft red lines and get them updated. I don't know at what point exactly we're going to get to review agencies. It sounds like we'll need to have at least one more SSR meeting. Jared and Drea are on top of managing that contract because we are running out of time with Logan Simpson. We had hoped to have a meeting with the Planning Commission in September. I don't know if we're going to hit that target. But once we have this ready and out to review agencies, there would be a there would be a Planning Commission meeting for a recommendation and then a BOCC hearing for adoption. So that is the end of my presentation. Maybe if we want to go to a quick break and then come back for a little more discussion. And I don't know how much public we have on the line, if any.
It is 11 o'clock on the nose. Let's return at 11:10. We will follow Kay's advice. More discussion to follow. Thank you.
We're trying to figure out if I.
Look at the backlog.
Oh my gosh, I've been 21 texts.
21 texts. You're very popular. Welcome back, everybody. I am going to call us back to order. And when everyone is seated, we will continue in discussion mode. And I know that we had touched upon the question of height, and we can circle back to that. Before we dive into that, which may take us a little time, perhaps we should see if there are any other issues that we know we want to bring up. Are there any questions on the presentation that Kay just made that you'd like to flag for this time for discussion? Joss.
Returning the map she had with possible parcels.
Okay.
A little bit about that.
We'll go to the maps with the proposed East End master plan zoning. And Kay's about to pull that up right now, so maybe we'll start there. If anybody else thinks of a question, go ahead, Ann.
We did have a question in there, from Brad Johnson about the height and fire.
Yes.
So I'll just go ahead and answer that now. So anytime we have a development application of any level, almost any application is getting referred to the fire district where the project is located. And we're relying on them to tell us whether or not they have the ability to adequately serve it. So if it's going to be a taller building, they're going to tell us, are they able to get their apparatus to it? Telluride Fire has a pretty good assortment of, trucks that, can reach the taller buildings here in town, and in Mountain Village. So, we're good on that regard. I'm not sure what Norwood's capability is, but we're not looking at taller buildings in Norwood anyhow. We're also relying on them to tell us whether or not they've got fire flow. And sometimes it is a requirement from the fire department to add a standpipe if a hydrant isn't close enough. There could be other mitigation requirements. And then, of course, as I mentioned, houses of a certain size plus commercial buildings have to have fire sprinklers. So it's all part of the process.
Great. Yeah, one of the things that came to mind when I was thinking of that question was that if we get into a scenario where vertical construction does unlock more affordable housing options, is there potentially the unlocking of some grant opportunities to further equip the fire departments with equipment that can, say, produce higher pressures or reach higher heights? So just a curiosity that if we were to continue down that path of vertical construction, does that perhaps create opportunities for them for external funding to further equip? Just perhaps something to keep in the back of our minds as we look at these things.
Yeah, and so the fire departments as their own districts, they have their own mill levies, they have their own funding, and it's really up to them to decide where their needs lie. Right now, Telluride Fire District is focusing on grant funds for training facilities. And we all know that we pay, those of us, paying property taxes or chipping into their funding as well. So if there were something very specific to a single activity, they could ask that that use or that proposed activity or use, do something that adds to their capacity. For example, if we were getting a solar battery storage facility, the fire district might say, hey, we don't have the capacity for this. You need to do that. So.
I have a question about our further discussion. Are we gonna, or do you want us to go through Appendix A with you and ask questions on that, or is that too detailed for this meeting?
Because Appendix A needs a lot of updating
Okay.
in light of our most recent discussions, I don't think it would be too productive.
That's fair.
Um,
I might just send you a few questions.
yeah.
Okay.
And so anyhow, question about the future land use map.
I guess my general question, and you did it quickly, but I'm hoping we can go into a little more depth, is if these changes do incentivize some possibilities for housing, what does that look like? Like, how many possible parcels are they? Would they have to rezone? Is there any possibility that we're looking at the high-end density stuff, or is it all probably going to be lower? I'm just kind of curious about how it plays out on the map.
Yeah. So looking at this map, this area here is already zoned community housing. That's the Mountain Village parcel. And then this end out here is expected to be the wastewater treatment plant, but you've got a chunk in between. So that could be, right now it's zoned F, and they could come back and ask to zone to high density, CH, mixed use development, any number of zone districts, depending on whatever it is that they want to achieve out of it.
Yeah.
This piece over here below Two Rivers is owned by the Forest Service.
Okay.
So that would most likely be a public land trade.
Yep.
And so we'd expect it to be a public driven project. Again, choice of zone districts, community housing would probably be the most likely.
Yep.
And
And that's identified because it would be a very appropriate piece, or because that's already been a discussion?
It's been in discussion. The Forest Service has identified it. When we were going through the master plan, we said, what properties do you think could become housing?
Yeah.
And that's one of the parcels that they identified.
Okay.
So,
So, but on this map, it's called out as RH because the East End Master Plan suggests that that is a possible future use for that person?
it's a residential high future land use classification, which then has, these potential zone districts listed in the master plan.
Got it.
Okay, would a mixed use application be a two-step, or would it require a PUD? Because we'd have to look at the measures and all,
It's going to depend on
and on size and complexity.
the size and the complexity. So yeah, there's two routes to get to a mixed use development. One is through the high density zone district, and one is through the MXD zone. And the MXD zone does have to be through a PUD, and the only housing in it would be affordable housing.
But, so then the alternative might be to go community housing, which does have some neighborhood commercial possibilities.
Right, and so community housing also allows some limited neighborhood commercial uses through a PUD. There's some community serving stuff that's less than a PUD. But if you want to do commercial, neighborhood commercial type stuff, that did say PUD. Of course, that we just did the amendment to the Ilium industrial park that allows a little bit of that neighborhood commercial in there, which would relieve the tendency to want to try and put some more down there.
Sure.
Can you just, sorry, maybe clarify that? Is there any opportunity for a one or two step mixed use development, or did you say anything that's gonna have any commercial component has to go through a PUD? Because that, I think, well, my vision would be that if we have a larger community, that it does have some on-site services, just,
Mhm.
A grocery store or something, laundromat, and we, again, are trying to get our away from the PUD for.
Yeah, maybe, I'm kind of, I'd have to stop sharing and go look at my code. But as I recall, the neighborhood commercial uses don't kick in CH until you hit the PUD level. In the high density, we'll have to figure out where that kicks in.
Okay. But yeah, I think we should, I'm writing that down as, yeah.
So if we consider that for CH, do we also want to consider that for high density? Or do we want to drive that into the CH zone specifically?
Well, so the high density zone already has the ability to do a mix of uses. And the question is, how much, if they're going for the high 80% plus tier, then you're going to be seeing less of the commercial and such, but it doesn't preclude that.
Oh, so if we do, say, a tier 1 that allows a 2-step review with 50% deed restrictions, there could be commercial in there also?
There could be,
And that could be a 2-step process.
it could be, yes.
That's good.
That point was missed on.
And the commercial is in addition to the free market units that are part of the
There's-
ratio?
So there's a formula for, when we set out density, and number of units, there's a formula to convert commercial and lodging uses to residential equivalents. And then from that, you'll figure out, okay, if I do this many residential units and this many, this much commercial floor area and this many hotel rooms, that equals out to the density that I can do on this property.
So when we say 50% residential, deed restricted, the commercial would be matched into that other
Yes.
50%.
Not really, that's not what I heard. I heard it would be mapped into the whole thing.
It would be mathed into the density.
Yeah.
So, say if you've got a project that says you can have, 50 units, and you're going to have at least 50% of those be affordable housing, so 25 units. The remaining 25 units could be free market residential or a commercial equivalent or a lodging equivalent.
I was wrong. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's her.
Yeah.
Clear.
Yeah, I totally missed that. Okay, and then something similar exists in community housing.
The community housing didn't exactly set it out that way. As clearly as the, because, yeah. But what it does say is, and we would probably, yeah. We probably need to clear that up
Right.
in the CH zone.
Well,
It's not there right now.
yeah, one thing I've been trying to parse out is if the HD zone is getting reshaped here to basically match or mirror the community housing zone district.
Yeah.
Like, are there advantages or disadvantages for anyone to rezone to any given either of those zone districts?
Yeah.
And would we want to consider shaping them to reflect a certain advantage or like nudge a landowner to rezone? The whole goal is obvious, but through this exercise is to reduce barriers to build more community housing, deed restricted housing but as CH zone is written currently and what is being proposed for high density zone district with these tiers is what I've been trying to kind of figure out, like, what is the difference there?
Yeah.
As this is currently proposed.
And do
Yeah,
we even need
so-
both? Like,
Right,
can
right,
we
yeah.
create craft to high density so it functions like the CH? So I don't know, I don't, yeah.
So CH starts with the 1- and 2-step process. for 100% affordable housing. Whereas the HD zone, if you want to go 100%, or, you know, 1/3, 2/3, free market to affordable housing, affordable to free market. You're in the PUD process. And as you deed restrict more, you move into the 1 and 2 step process. Whereas with community housing, as you want to incorporate more free market, you move towards the PUD process. So there's kind of they start at opposite ends of this affordable scale, and they meet in the middle. And the reason for keeping the high density zone is there might be somebody out there that has property and says, I'm not interested in doing primarily affordable. I want to be on the, you know, we wish that they would do more affordable, but as a property owner, they have the right. We don't want to zone out the ability for somebody to do that type of development.
And
Makes sense.
theoretically, there are more properties that could ask for rezoning to CH than to high density. Is that correct? It's like in more categories.
I mean, we only really have 3 vacant parcels. Well, one's already zoned CH. We only really have 2 parcels left. Unless somebody comes up with more somewhere and does a master plan amendment.
There's the one further south.
Yeah, can you address the?
So, oh yeah, I forgot about that
Yeah.
one. And so, yeah, we've just got a couple of parcels. You know, we don't have any parcels that are Mountain Village scale.
Right.
Yeah.
And the point was made in the SSR conversations that an HD development was more than likely going to be government driven, not private.
An affordable
Whether you
housing,
accept that generalization or
Yeah.
not, but
Yeah,
that
an
was the-
affordable HD development would be government driven.
yeah,
Right,
the,
tier 2.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, tier 2 development would probably be government driven, whereas in the PUD level or the maybe getting into tier 1, that could be a private developer.
Okay, we've talked about high density now. On the low and medium density, do those have potential for mixed use, or was that only in H2?
Only in the HD zone, the residential high and residential low, or the HD and LD zone districts do not have the ability for adding in commercial uses. There are some civic uses that can be in some of those.
LD and medium?
For low and medium, there are some civic uses that can be in there, but not commercial uses. And, you know, keep in mind that you know, the name is well, the purpose of those zone districts really is residential. And
Yeah,
to not start
Surprised to
scattering.
me that high could have it, so that's why I
Yeah.
went there.
Yeah, well, high was intended to create community level developments that are truly mixed.
But conceptualizing maybe like a cottage housing development on medium density lands, for example, there could be some civic uses potentially that could serve that kind of a development.
Yes.
Can I ask a question in a totally different vein?
Let's
done
make
here?
sure that we've answered Joss's question regarding the map before we jump to a new topic.
I mean, I appreciate the clarity. I think in some regards, I don't know how much we've done to increase the chances that we're gonna get the housing we need, given the realities of the map, but that doesn't mean it's not the right direction to go.
You just summarized the SSR meeting. every time we get together.
We basically
And then
said-
Jared has this great speech that he'll give you if you want. Jared, do you want to do the great speech? The one where the one where we get, if we get one unit, our work is not wasted.
I mean, I will give the speech again, and paper will pick it up again. Yeah, it's a challenge, right? Because we are trying to build a system that will incentivize a developer, right? Because, and that's one of the points we made in the last SSR, is we talked a lot about, are we just mucking around with the rules we as a local government will use to build housing? And my response was, if we can adjust these rules in a way that it's a private developer to build one unit, I'm considering that a win, right? Because frankly, if we have anybody participate in this effort that is not a government unit, it's a win. And so it is a tough thing to think about, because we look at kind of, I played a game of Monopoly again this week, right? And you're given a board, you're given a certain amount of money, and you're given the system, right? And so we have a lot of those pieces already defined. We're tweaking around the edges to see if we can pull somebody else who can. And I'd like to, part of me is like, I'd like to blow it all up and reset the rules. But we can't do that. So we're working to make a little bit of space for somebody besides a local government to play some role.
This is where we applaud.
I'm speaking for more than one unit.
It's kind of like the energy approach, where all the above is the best way forward, and just trying to open all the doors we can.
Our developers repeatedly said, time is money, and so the biggest thing we could do to incentivize this is to go get rid of the PUD process and to shove things into 1 and 2 step, because the numbers work on any given day in any given year, and then they don't again for a long time. So if they can tackle it when the numbers work, then we've got projects.
Okay, and then the other angle, this is probably a little bit of a hot potato, but the thing that the planning commission and then the BOCC did when we first did the CH zone district, and then we got feedback from the public that they absolutely did not accept it and it was changed, was that we went in and said, because we prioritize housing for our community, we're going to change the review standards such that affordable housing doesn't necessarily have to be compatible with the surrounding parcels. Is that anything about review standards that was talked about with the SSR, like that end of the approach also?
Yes, it was talked about, and where we landed was the most efficient way to confine that conversation is through caps. And that if the impact was greater than the cap, that it was worthy of a full 5-step knockdown, drag out public process with lots of input and lots of time. And that if it was, again, the craft magic numbers less than the cap, that it could proceed more smoothly with less time and discussion.
But with the caps now, if I'm understanding this correctly, which I may not be, I think there was like more potential for very dense, not necessarily huge, but very dense pockets of things when we had those changes to the review standards than we are seeing right now. Is that accurate?
I think that if you're using the word dense pockets synonymously with clustering, then yes, that's what we were trying to steer people towards with our densities and our lot sizes, is that clustering worked better, and that we had, through the cap and through those other 2 variables, allowed people, potential developers, to put high density uses in a small corner of a large parcel without having to go through a full on 5-step, year-and-a-half process.
Okay, so the limits we're seeing here are less about that and more about the fact that so much of the county's East End properties in subdivisions.
Yep. And that is the sad truth of the map that you've pointed out.
Yeah.
We don't have many cards to play.
Yeah.
And we're trying to steer the last few cards that we have in the direction we'd like.
And so the next step, along with looking at deed restrictions and stuff, might be specifically looking at ways to incentivize subdivisions to look at their holdings together and see if they can eke out.
That would be miraculous. And I'm happy to do that, but I don't think we're going to get there today. But you're right. Next step.
Today, looking down the road. Okay, thank you.
Ian.
I don't know if this is something you have in your head or not, but.
Yeah, Mike,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure if you have these figures in your head, but you might, can you give us a really round number of how many units we might possibly get out of all those little areas that you're pointing out that have possible development?
We haven't done the math because a lot of it is highly dependent on the ability to develop water.
Yeah.
Or extend water from an existing provider. And, what do they have?
Yeah.
So, there's some that, we've done, the ones that are county controlled. Yeah, there've been some rough plans, like for the Pathfinder area. But we haven't done any for over at the Matterhorn area. That piece of residential high, the owner has had a lot of ideas and thoughts, whether or not it's practical and, you can do it, don't know. Up here on this, obviously the community housing zone section that's, that belongs to Mountain Village, they're actively working on development of that.
Yeah.
But the others, nobody's really looked into.
No, and that forest plot parcel?
Yeah, they have, if anybody's done any calculations on that, and it would be the part east of the road, because the west is wetlands and stuff.
Yeah.
But if anybody's done any calculations on that, they haven't been shared.
How big is that parcel though?
It's actually quite large.
Looks large.
I was measuring it on Monday and I think it was like, about 40 acres on the east side of the road, 40 or 50 acres.
Right.
Ian, I think that the answer to your question, really broadly speaking, and this is without doing any math, so it's coming from an English major,
Not many.
is we're never going to catch up on the 1,100 units that we need.
We're short, yeah.
But if we're lucky, we might get half of it. That's just a made up guess. And at that point, maybe we're close to built out and we kind of hit stasis between existing zoning, existing available vacant land and water. There is an endpoint to all this.
Yeah. I would be pretty amazed if we got that many.
Me too.
So, okay, thanks. I just wanted to get a general idea.
If I could, Ian, I
Yeah.
think you hit on something that we talked about a little bit in the last SSR meeting. And we tried to put it through the, just looking at one parcel, right? So we looked at the county's plot at Pathfinder.
Mhm.
And at CH zoning at 20 density units per acre, technically that's 54 acres. And that's 1,040 units that we could theoretically try and squeeze onto that site. And then we started talking about what other things restrict, because again, that
Yeah.
we know community wide. That number is gonna get thrown out. Right? Somebody's gonna say, they're gonna build 1,000 units on those. No, we aren't, right? We don't have the water.
Right.
There's not enough building envelope to actually do that. It's not going to fit any sort of process. It's not going to survive any sort of process through either of these two boards. With that kind of density. And so one of the things that we did talk about is, the numbers, when you look at these adjustments, can become scary quickly. But there are so many other review standards and constraints
Yeah.
of the properties that exist across our county and RA that are gonna govern what is gonna be palatable.
Right.
And so that,
Impossible.
and possible.
And yeah, water and geography are probably the two biggest, yeah.
And just to carry on your example of Pathfinder, we've discussed it in public meetings, like a sketch plan for that property, and what is it, 73 units?
So I think maxed out 70.
79, so, yes, 20 times 54 is 1,000, but when you really look at the land and the water and
Alright.
all that, it's 79.
Okay,
Only a fraction of it is buildable. I think that's the key point
Yeah,
there.
right,
It's
gotcha.
like 6 to 9 acres of buildable land.
sure, just,
But if
Like
you want to
driving
know
by, you
what
get
the
that.
potential top end number might be, just wait, the public will tell you.
yeah.
And he needed to counter his soundbite, so I'm glad you said that. That was been 73.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this came up a lot during the community housing
Yes.
discussions. And there's been a lot of demand for some sort of carrying capacity study. And, carrying capacity is all about, what the community is willing to tolerate as well as what you're willing to serve. If you go back and you look at the tray pack,
20,000.
yeah,
Really?
yes. Looking at 20,000 lots and where, how. So it really is about,
So we dodged that bullet.
Yeah.
We do have 15 minutes left, and we did want to talk a little bit about potential height adjustments.
Mhm.
If we could shift our conversation that direction, I think that would be wise.
That off.
Please.
In Appendix A, which I know we're not going to dig into today, but also in your presentation case, somewhere in there, you talked about allowing a variance up to 40 feet and then another criteria allowed up to 45. And I'm wondering why that, why are they different? And if we're gonna talk about a variance, what do we allow it up to?
Okay. I'm going to pull up a different part of,
Okay, while you're pulling, could I ask Ian as a builder a question? At 35, I believe it's pretty easy to get 3 stories with all the necessary floor, subfloor, and so forth. At 40 feet, does that get you 4 stories, or do you need 45?
Well, 1 story is generally considered 10 feet,
Okay.
so you'd be going out of the ground a certain amount to begin with, so that's a few feet. And topography, as we were discussing, it would be tricky. The top floor might have 6-foot walls.
If you went 40.
Yeah,
So 45 allows easy finish.
full height
and
walls.
Not struggle. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
right. Yeah, low pitch, high pitch, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the way we, and John, chime in if I get this wrong, or Nicola. The way we measure height, it is 35 feet above any point of grade. So if the grade slopes, either the building has to slope or your uphill end is shorter. If it's a pitched roof, some sort of pitched roof, you can have an extra 5 feet. So that's already built in.
Okay.
Okay.
But if you've got a site with a significant slope on it, you can kind of get penalized, and it can also add to your construction costs because you're having to step down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the challenges that we've faced. But this is the CH zone, so we say maximum building height, 35 feet for development that is net zero on an annual basis, 45 feet. So that was intended to not only, allow Well, and also we have an exception for necessary equipment, flues, chimneys, things like that. But, you know, so giving some extra in case you had solar up there, and then also, you know, an extra floor, to help it out. Now, this doesn't increase your density, but it does increase your, you know, ability to go vertical. And, that actually can, you know, help on your construction costs because you're getting, you know, 25% or 1/3 more floor area on the cost of one foundation.
That's the most expensive part of a building.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think where we need to circle back to is just table 4 in the draft audit report.
Mm-hmm.
The proposed recommended changes to density allowances, current recommended density allowances, proposed recommendations. But we really dove into the numbers on that. We changed from density bonuses of 25%, 35%. Remember, we changed to the tiered approach. But in that table, we lost the 10-foot height increase. And I
Yeah.
don't think that was intentional.
No, it wasn't intentional. And there's like I said, there's a lot in Appendix A that needs going through.
I'm in Appendix A though. I'm just in the report.
Yeah, and in the report, the two have to match up. So, you know, we'll need to make sure that we've got everything aligned. And, we want to offer up some alternative language. We'd had, something about, you know, going 35, 40, 45, depending on, you know, if it were more deeply affordable. So if it were getting into the 120%, 200% AMIs for rental and ownership respectively, that's when the extra height was kicking in. That's the last draft I saw.
Okay, well, this draft that's in our packet just it shows the density bonuses and it just says the 50% density bonus. So I don't think we ever talked about AMIs. We were just, to me, that would align with either the tier 1 or tier 2 getting that 10-foot height increase.
And wouldn't AMI percentage be more baked into the deed restriction language itself, not into the code? So that's not really.
I mean, that's the direction that, that was in here and.
I would caution against that for any specific AMI percentages to be written into the code at all, because that's a moving target as economies change and.
Yeah, we took it out of the prioritized housing review for that reason.
Yeah. Yes.
No, it's,
still in
it
there?
had to be in there because it had to meet.
Oh, yeah.
the state requirements, but
Great.
yeah, I don't totally disagree with you. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I know somewhere in this document, and don't ask me to find the page right now. The proposal was extra height if it were more deeply affordable. But if you're willing to go extra height simply because they're moving into the tier 1 and tier 2, that's.
And the height requirements would apply to the entire development, not just the deed restricted units? Question mark?
Well, so we could do something like we did with the MXD zone where we say, but the extra height has to be affordable housing. Which means
That would,
your
that
deed
would,
restricted people are getting great views.
that would align with the SSR's desire, which was if we're going to allow more density, that it has to be for housing. And knowing that we've already played that trick and used that at Society Turn to hopefully advantage, I think continuing that is a lot cleaner than tying anything to AMI.
I would personally totally favor the height bonus for anyone going with tier 2 roof, even for the non-deed restricted units, because it's an incentive to get people to do that. If I get to be higher, great. But if only my neighbors get to be higher, why would I want to build them deed restricted? I'll just keep them there and not deed restrict them.
Because you're getting more density out of your development.
Yeah, but I don't want my neighbors looking down on me. If I'm the one non-deed restricted unit and I'm gonna deed restrict these houses around me. I don't know, I can't imagine someone going that route. I'd wanna be the tallest castle on the hill, not the shortest.
I guess I'm thinking about this coming from more of like developers.
Yeah.
Like, they're the developer is the one who's kind of like laying the groundwork with the development application, and then as far as whomever is buying individual units, that ship has already
Yeah.
sailed.
And then also keeping in mind that, the free market part is what's funding the, significantly subsidizing, if you will, the deed restricted portion, and the money lies in the penthouses. So, maybe we do say it's okay to have some extra height and, put people up in the air. And the more affordable stuff is down lower, but not subterranean like a lot of the affordable housing units were in the 90s and even now.
Right, so
Um,
for it to pencil out, it might
yeah.
need to be allowed throughout the development.
Yeah.
Well, and that's specific to high density, but on the low density side, are we also talking about the height bonus?
No,
So if they're just staying in the lowest end and they're going the PUD route because they don't want to deal with the extra housing, they want to get as much free market as they can out of it, then it stays at the regular
I
height.
mean, low.
Oh, low and medium,
Zone district.
low and medium,
At the table.
zone districts.
Oh,
Are you looking at the new update from yesterday, or are you looking at the big packet?
I was
They're
looking at
different.
page 21.
Okay.
They are different, and that's what I'm saying. Page 21 of our packet had this height density bonus, and we lost it when we revamped the table, but we never
Yeah.
talked about losing it.
Yeah. So in the areas where you're talking about units per acre, we would stick with the 35-foot height limit. But where we're talking units let me reverse it. If we're talking about acres per unit, so low density, medium density, we would stick with the 35-foot height. But if we're talking units per acre, the higher density stuff like high density commercial or community housing, affordable housing, PUD, even although we haven't opened up that one, then we could be talking about higher heights.
Okay.
Because when you're on the large lots, you can spread out.
But again, what our consultant recommended and what we discussed was not that. We had said, so we're incentivizing the tiers by giving you more density for having deed restricted units, but this is saying at that highest tier, you also get the height bonus for going 80%. This wasn't saying 80%, this was saying 50% density bonus. So this is again a step
Right.
in history, but we never as an SSR talked about losing that 10-foot height bonus, and that applied to the low density,
Mhm.
medium density, and the high density zones.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's just a matter of, we got a lot of moving parts right now. It was not our intent to dump it.
So do we want that height bonus then for tier 2 for low, medium, and high density zones?
no.
I'm saying it's
for
not
large.
necessary in low and medium.
And is it only for tier 2, or is it?
Both,
Tier
based
one
on
and-
what is in this table.
Yeah.
So in this table for, these original numbers, a density bonus of 50% or more, which would apply to tier
Oh,
1
there it is.
and up, then it would be a 10-foot height increase. And I think we're all in consensus that this really doesn't make sense in the low and medium density zones, but absolutely in the high density.
For both tier 1 and tier 2.
Right,
I
so
know.
to omit the
Yeah.
option of a 10-foot height increase.
Yeah.
For low and medium density, but
I'm not feeling compelled to offer a height increase on free market. Because they've got plenty of, if you're building that, you can go up to 12,000 square feet. Feel free.
Well, so Galena just said, we're not even considering it for low and medium density, we're only considering it for the high density. Is high density gonna have a 12,000 square foot house on it?
Hypothetically, it could, but probably not. Once they rezone it to high density, they're gonna be going for the high density development.
So then it gets kind of funky if you've got
Yeah.
varying height allowances, especially if you're doing floors. That gets weird.
Yeah, so what we would be doing is saying if you're going for tier one, if you're going the PUD route, purely PUD route in the HD zone, then your maximum height is 35 feet. If you're doing tier one or tier two, then your maximum height can be 45 feet.
But Lee only wants that to apply to the
I think,
restricted
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out.
yeah, and so, I mean, that's what we did in the MXD zone, but the MXD doesn't allow any free market. You know, CH zone is geared, you know, it limits the amount of free market that can be in there. And I could, yeah, I mean, I could argue it both ways. I go with the MXD approach where it's like, well, only if it's your deed restricted housing do you get the extra height, and the non-deed restricted has to be the regular height. But again, when you're looking at your free market funding your affordable deed restricted housing, where does the bang for the buck come? Where does the revenue come? And you know, developers are going to tell you, hey, I can get a lot more money if I can make my, you know, tallest units be free market.
Jared.
And I think this is yet another instance of that conversation we've had with the SSR about how do we incentivize non-governmental entities to play the game? And so that's the balance here is, you know, if we say, hey, you only get this height adjustment or this height bonus if that area is deed restricted, right? We aren't putting that same carrot on the table that we may otherwise, right? And so again, it's there's no right answer to this, but what is the focus? What's our intention?
In the CH zone district, the height bonuses, do they apply to free market and deed restricted?
We didn't separate that out because
So the answer
free
is yes,
market,
right?
free market was such a small part that we didn't even consider that.
Right. I mean, I think we should be consistent.
Well,
Right, and just, and everyone might know, but the height allowances in CH are directly tied to net zero percentages, right? Which to Hallie's point with the
LECC.
the upcoming adoption of the LECC, it's kind of a moot incentive. It's not, it's that's gonna be required anyways, right? So
It's not going to be quite net zero, but it's
Yeah,
going to
no,
be one
it's-
step closer. Yeah.
yeah,
Jared, and then I've got an idea.
I just wanted to flesh out that concept in CH, right? If something is zoned CH, it goes net zero. There is no restriction saying that the top unit of whatever gets built has to be deed restricted,
Right.
right? That could be the 10% allowance.
Mhm.
And in most likely would if it were going to be built kind of stacked instead of spread out, right? And so this would be a little inconsistent with that existing code in CH.
I mean, couldn't we say something like you get that height variance in multi-unit buildings? Because is your concern that they'll just build higher in their free market homes?
Yeah, let's add the words multi-unit buildings because it's high density and that just guards the hen house that Kay feels is already in the high density, not too big a worry, but we can eliminate the worry. And the other suggestion I have is something that Paul Major said, which is none of us know exactly what is going to happen, but we should try something and we can always come back and fix it. We may blow it once, but if we don't make some concessions and some incentives, we're not going to see any change. And what we're doing right now isn't working.
I think there's some pushback to the idea that the free market house will be the penthouse and everyone else will live below them. But at the same time, those free market units are the ones that will pay for the affordable housing. They have to be the penthouse if you want those dollars.
We agree.
to Go down.
No problem with that. I think that's realistic.
That's capitalism.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I love living in that house, but I think the issue that have that is sort of aligning with Lee is seeing like a multifamily affordable housing unit and then a big tall house there, right? Like, we don't want.
That's why we were gonna add the language, it has to be multi-family, and that will eliminate a big, tall, free market house.
Cause then you don't allow that, you have the deed restricted house looking or unit looking
No,
down.
if, and if you're a savvy developer, you don't set it up that way. You put the free market fancy house in the far corner and you use the rolling hills, or you figure out a way to, if that's your goal. And in high density, we've already heard from Kay, that's very unlikely that there'll be a single family home. There will be, hopefully, high density use.
And we were, I'm not sure if it's in, I think it's in Appendix A. I know in community housing, we were looking at putting a 3,000 square foot cap on single family. So we weren't ending up with a lot of outsized units.
That was for. Wait, what?
We were, so, and again, this isn't fully baked, but we were looking at putting a 3,000 square foot unit cap size in CH, and I think we need to look at that a little bit more.
And so you're suggesting we also do that for high density?
Maybe.
For free market and affordable housing?
That comes back to the Paul Major's concern, maybe that if there's too many restrictions around this, nobody's gonna bite.
Yeah.
I agree. If we're really trying to incentivize the idea that someone could build a free market house that would help them pay to build affordable housing and they're willing to do that, we can't restrict the free market piece of it too much.
Yeah, and quite frankly, if we were getting 20% of the units or less as very large, more luxury, but we're still getting, 80% or more really good affordable.
Yeah.
Let's do this. We're getting into the same kind of conversation that the SSR has, where we have a bunch of really smart people that can speak the language. Let's take the concept of height as we've kind of narrowed it down to our next SSR meeting and come back with another series of brains working on it. And Hallie, and Lee, you get to continue this threads, which will be good because we need that connection to introduce it to the SSR. And we'll come back with recommendations from the SSR for this group to consider. Does that seem like a wise course? Okay. Great. Is there anything else? Yes, Hallie.
Actually, a question I wanted to ask earlier. We have made a consistent effort to go away from the people per acre and into the DU per acre. Can we do that for that max density with PUD? Density?
That's the current code.
But can we change that? We're changing
Yes,
the code.
we will get away from that.
Cool. So what will those become?
So it'll probably be 10. Similar, so you see that right now on low and medium, that's also the starting point for tier 1. So we'll probably also go with 10 on high density.
What's that min and max?
Okay, so that, do we want to keep a high density minimum? Because this was translates approximately to 10 to 20 units per acre. With a PUD, do we want to keep a floor in there? So that they have to develop at least a certain number.
What's the downside to keeping a floor?
It keeps people from, granted, we don't have any land currently zoned high density, so you kind of have to assume that anybody who does rezone is going to want to do as much as they can. I have certainly seen over the years many examples where people have zoning for fairly high density and they come in and they don't maximize,
Underutilizing.
they greatly underutilize it and they do it in such a way that it's blocked from being redeveloped in the future.
Which was the SSR concern why we kept the proposed density by right at 1.5. Because we didn't want someone to come in and just build like 3 units.
My only concern would be lots that are really hard to build on. So they might be trying to achieve the density that they can, but not able to hit a minimum. I don't know if that's real concern, but
Yeah, I can think of a lot or two where that might actually apply.
yeah.
Based on our limited map.
So if we don't have a floor, we're assuming that most sane people would want to maximize their profit.
Or if we have a floor, they have to be able to apply for a variance.
Yeah.
If the lot doesn't allow them to meet it, I'd say.
So then does the 80 people per acre maximum become
20
20?
units per acre.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it goes 10 minimum, 20 maximum.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that we would have to figure out because what we would probably want to do is, so the density with PUD process, we'd probably want to have 10, start with 10 because that aligns with what we've also got for low and medium.
Because that's tier 1. And so
Yeah,
they married.
but yeah, do we want to set a floor and say, you have to have at least 5 dwelling units per acre?
What that does is it actually shoves people into the tier 1 and 2 categories. It says, those don't have a floor, but you have to build affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. I think the SSR should discuss this as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Anne.
And you must be hungry. And lunch has arrived. If there's other thoughts that the SSR should take up, let's channel them to Kay. And let's consider the general conversation that we had today beneficial. It's going to go to the Planning Commission next in a more complete form. And we will, correct? You looked quizzical, Kay.
Oh, Brad, you had a question in the chat about the 2,500 square foot reduced limit. What section was that?
Oh, that's
in?
for the Wrights Mesa.
Yeah,
Oh,
I just wanted to make sure it was clear. Are we including 0 lot line divisions for attached townhomes? Are we considering detached townhome types of developments where those sorts of things? Because living next to a 2,500 square foot lot in Norwood, it's pretty tight. And I just wanted to understand the thought process. But Kay, that's something maybe you and I can talk about in a couple weeks.
yeah. So, again, so Wrights Mesa Town Residential, I mean, I've struggled with, do we even want to touch that because it's tied to the Wrights Mesa town of Wrights Mesa plan and code. But the idea would be if they're in a town residential area and they're doing the higher affordability, then they could get down to 2,500 square foot lots, which is actually a typical old plat lot size. So like town of Telluride, minimum lot size is 2,500 square feet.
My question is kind of tied to what Brad just brought up. It sounds like there is plenty that we have already brought up for the SSR to engage on in a future meeting, but it's gonna take up all the time and more. When do you envision Kay diving into some of these Wrights Mesa specific conversations, discussions to hash all that out? Because it hasn't even really, there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, and we really have been focusing on the low, medium, high density and CH zones. With, a little bit in, the Wrights Mesa F zone districts. Regarding the caretaker and secondary units. I've been reluctant to really dive into the Wrights Mesa related or, to like town residential zone much because like I said, it's tied to the Wrights Mesa or to the Town of Norwood master plan and the Town of Norwood zoning. And there was a definite intent to not create county zoning that was annexable to the town that would be incompatible with the town. You know, because if we start allowing, you know, more density and smaller lots and you know, greater heights and smaller setbacks, the town's going to be reluctant to annex it because it's going to be you know, they're going to be non-conforming. So that's why we really weren't diving into that too much.
Has there been any discussion around? I mean, coming specifically from Nina Koeth, who is really passionate around this cottage housing concept and making that an allowable use.
Every meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, definitely. We're putting that in there because, yeah, the way it's in the code right now is inconsistent. And also the fact that you immediately have to dive into a PUD. And also it was quite limiting. It was, I think it was capped at 9 units. That just didn't really make sense to us. So, you know, we do have some stuff in there for Wrights Mesa. I just didn't go into it today because that wasn't the, you know, the heftier part of it.
Thank you. That's adequate makes sense.
All right. Do you have other questions, Galina? If not, adequate and makes sense is about as good as I think we can end up. Take the win. And again, if you do have other ideas or questions, Kay remains available, as she always does.
Yes.
Before we close, can I just thank Kay and I know the rest of your team, Jared, John Drea, and
Nicola.
all the staff who's been involved, and Lance for leading the SSR, Lee and Hallie for participating. I mean, I am so impressed with what you've come up with. And it is so refreshing to not have to do all of this ourselves, you know, it's amazing. I'm really impressed and really grateful. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Commissioner. Let's end on that note. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Yeah.